Japanese society heatedly debated their origins. They still ask questions such as, who are we and where did they come from? A question that is asked in many societies. But when a large prehistoric settlement was discovered in Amura Prefecture in the far north of Honshu, it would change Japan as we know it. It was a story that would be found on every newspaper in Japan, the earliest artifact that dated back from about 30,000 BCE. Tools were discovered. Tools scholars thought dated back to an old Stone Age. Culture that spread from Northeast Asia into Japanese, Sakhalin, Kamchatka Peninsula, and even to North America. During the time these tools were discovered, scholars realized these tools were possibly used during the Old Stone Age. These tools developed pottery within the hunting and gathering society. Neolithic hunters and gatherers created figures of clay. These pottery figures would be one of the oldest in the world, older than any pottery in the Middle East. The period this the period this pottery came from would be known as the Jomon period, or from the Jomon Society. The reason why it would be called the Jomon period is due to the cord markings that characterize the ceramics made during this time, or the rope-like cord patterns designed on the pottery. This hollow figurine, or Dogu, of a female is representative of the type found in the Tohoku region. It is displayed at the Metropolitan Museum, but many of the Jomon pottery figures are displayed all over the world. There are pottery figures that could be found at the British Museum, the University of Art Museum, the Tokyo University of Arts, and many others. But the main one, in my opinion, would be the Prefectural Amori Museum of Art. The pottery figures that are featured in these museums range from sizes 2 inches up to nearly 2 feet for the larger dogo. This specific dogo from the late to final Jomon period is 6.5 inches in height, or 16.5 centimeters. Looking at this pottery figure, you can immediately recognize those big coffee bean shaped eyes. It almost has an alien like aspect to its design as well. The nose and the mouth are just merely two small holes, and Dougal's eyes almost look like goggles. The true meaning of this convention remains unknown. While the other versions of the figures are more complex and never really supposed to be understood, other pottery figures have more complete examples of this type, have fleshy torsos with bare navels above thick, sturdy legs. The emphasis on the pointed breasts and generous hips of these figures suggests that they functioned as fertility symbols. Most of these figures were seen as symbols, with recognizably human or animal features. They have a fascinating history in Japan, dating back thousands of years. Dougal evolved within the earliest dated continuous tradition of pottery manufacture in the world, stretching back to about 12,500 BC. They were produced by the Jomon people, prehistoric foragers in the temperate forests that covered the Japanese archipelago. Jomon people lived in tune with the seasons and shared their rich natural world with the spirits. Since the Edo period, Dougal have been excavated from many sites throughout Japan. The best examples coming from central and eastern regions, from where most of the current exhibits are drawn. More than 1,000 Dougal have been recovered from each of the two major sites, Shakudo in Yamashita Prefecture and Sani Maruyama in Amori Prefecture, mostly in fragments. Nationwide, the total reported to date is about 1,800,000. The techniques used to make such pottery were modeling, clay applique marketed with twisted plant fibers, and burnishing. The artistic and high quality potteries are very unique, but what is a mystery is its use. There's a belief these dugals were used for the embodiment of spirits, venerated and revered, sometimes buried with the dead to guide them to the next world. Sort of how the Trojans would put a coin on the eyes or in the mouth of deceased so they can pay their ferryman Charon to ferry them throughout the underworld river known as Styx. But I digress. The debate between Japanese still continues. The functions of the Dogu are open for interpretation. The Japanese archipelago during the Jomon period was occupied by a large number of different groups of people or different societies. They probably spoke a number of different dialects and expressed themselves through a huge range of pottery styles. Over 400 local styles have been recognized to date. Jomon people lived in tune with their seasons and shared their rich natural world with the spirits. The mystery of the Jomon pottery figures could be compared to the mystery of the Easter Island heads. Although the two are entirely different objects, they share similarities though. The, the Easter Island heads were said to keep evil spirits away from the dead, and Dugals were said to be buried with the dead, so they can be guided to the next world, creating a symbol or meaning for both of these objects, especially when it came to making sure the dead remained in peace. An even more interesting debate concerning the Jomon people is a theory or scientific matter that links them to be of Korean descent. There have also been studies of hybridization, saying that both Yayo and Jomon genes have made a contribution to contemporary gene pool. Genetic studies have suggested interbreeding between the Yayo and Jomon people, with the Jomon contribution to modern Japanese being as much as 40%. Apparently, Yayo language prevailed along with the agricultural technology. Researchers who have studied Jomon and Yayo cultures came to the conclusion after studying various dialects of Japanese. The conclusion was all Japanese are descended from a founding language taken to the Japanese islands 2200 years ago. The finding sheds new light on the origins of the Japanese people, suggesting that their language is descended from that of the rice growing farmers who arrived in Japan from the Korean peninsula, and not from the hunter gatherers who first inhabited the islands some 30,000 years ago. In the 20th century, Dougal served as a potent source of artistic inspiration, and in recent decades, they have been even been featured in manga, comics, and PlayStation games. It is testimony to the power of the Dougal that they can serve simultaneously as symbols of prehistoric Japan, entrancing works of art, and protagonists in contemporary culture. Here are my citations. Now, not all my citations are here, which is why I have a Google Doc link in the bottom there. I recommend you go and check that out. That's where all my citations are, as well as the lecture I just gave, word for word. Most of the citations I used were mainly for pictures. The main websites I used for my research were the museum websites that I provided here. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson.